Yes.
And I would like to start from an apology. The second phase of Jacob's trouble, events leading up to. Originally, Brother Jack made a mistake in the program and he repeated the same subtitle, Events Leading Up to, also for tomorrow. I corrected him and he corrected the program, which was wrong because from what I can see, I won't be able to finish up today this part, Events Leading Up to. I don't even know how many parts I will need to do that because I would like to do justice to that subject. This subject, second phase of Jacob's trouble, came into being, this talk in Polish last year, and it consists of 5 60-minute talks in Polish. So maybe I will need 5 30-minute talks in English for that, maybe. So let's say events leading up to part one, tomorrow part two, and we will see as we go how many more parts will be needed. So that is my apology to begin with. I hope you will not regret it because by putting it or making it so much bigger, I will be able to put more details into it, which I think should be of interest to all of us because these are the things we are living with or we are entering, and most of them are ahead of us, hopefully just ahead of us. So after this short introduction and an apology, let me start with my talk. The term, the phase of Jacob's trouble or Jacob's trouble, refers to the suffering of natural Israel at the end of the gospel age. It comes from Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 7. Alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it. That's the only place in the Bible where Jacob's trouble is mentioned as an expression, as a term. And although it is mentioned only in Jeremiah, the idea of Jacob's trouble recurs in many scriptures, some of which we will be able to mention today and tomorrow. And what will be of special interest to us is not so much Israel's past, I won't be talking about it at all, as Israel's future, because Israel does have a future, and its rejection by God and from God and its related blindness on that account are only temporary. They will pass, they are passing, and Israel does have a future. As outlined and recounted in the Bible, the future of Israel is also the future of the whole world. Since it is through that nation that the kingdom of God will come to mankind, no other way, no other media. It is in that nation that Jesus' reign on earth will have its beginnings, nowhere else. Not the whole earth, not the whole earth as such, nor any other country, no other place on earth to start Jesus' kingdom. And three, it is only this nation that the new covenant will be made with, not the whole of mankind, but only this one nation. What about others? Someone may ask, what about other nations, as Israel or Jews are only part, a small part of the whole world of mankind. In order to share the blessings of God's kingdoms, all the others will have to become part of Israel, part of one of its 12 tribes. That's why it is so much important for everyone to learn, to realize what's going on, what is happening in that country, to that nation. In Isaiah chapter 2, we can read, "And it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it. And many people shall go and say, Come you, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. And he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And he shall judge among the nations, and shall rebuke many people. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore." And also note Jesus' words to the same effect from Matthew chapter 19. "And Jesus said unto them, his disciples, Verily I say unto you, that you which have followed me in the regeneration, when the Son of Man shall sit in the throne of his glory, you also shall sit upon 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Someone may ask, judging only the 12 tribes of Israel? What about the remainder of mankind? There are many, many more out of the 12 tribes of Israel. He said so because all the others of mankind are included in one of the 12 tribes of Israel. That's why it's not worth being anti-Semitic, because sooner or later, everybody will have to become part of Israel. So if anyone hates Israel or Jews today, it means that that person will have to hate themselves when the day comes, when in order to take advantage of the new covenant and its blessings, he or she, they will have to become part of Israel as well. Before that hope can materialize for anybody, however, Israel has to go through very dark times just ahead, with which, as put by Jeremiah, no other dark times in the history of that nation, and probably not only that nation, can compare. Because Jeremiah said, as we read on the first slide, that day is great, so that none is like it. And it is great, not in its positive, but in its negative sense. None like it. Since there are those people, even among Christians, who insist fleshly Israel has been rejected by God forever, let's ask Jeremiah and Paul if they share the view. Two scriptures, one from Jeremiah, the other from Paul, Romans 11. Let's have a look. Thus said the Lord, which giveth the sun for a light by day, and the ordinances of the moon and of the stars for a light by night, which divideth the sea when the waves thereof roar. The Lord of hosts is his name. If those ordinances depart from before me, said the Lord, then the seed of Israel also shall cease from being a nation before me forever. Thus said the Lord, if heaven above can be measured, and the foundations of the earth searched out beneath, I will also cast off all the seed of Israel for all that they have done, said the Lord. This verse 37 from Jeremiah in the King James Version says that I will cast off all the seed of Israel, but on condition that heaven above can be measured and on condition that the foundations of the earth can be searched out beneath. Of course, they cannot, so I have another more modern translation to show the real meaning of that scripture. So let's read this verse 37 once again in a different, more modern translation. I will not reject all the descendants of Israel because of all that they have done. That could only happen, so I could only reject them, if the heavens above could be measured, or the foundations of the earth below could all be explored, says the Lord. And because they cannot be measured and cannot be explored, he will not do that. So that's the real message of God in Jeremiah. And what about Paul from Romans 11? I say then, have God cast away his people? God forbid, for I also am an Israelite, of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. God hath not cast away his people, which he foreknew. I think that's enough, well, by way of showing, proving, drawing someone's attention to the fact that Israel does have a future, and that it is not that not all is lost for that nation, as some people, including many Christians, would like it to be. Fleshly Israel was rejected by and from God only temporarily, only for the duration of the time needed to search out the missing little flock members from among the heathen. And after that, God's grace was to return to this nation in order to bless through the Jews, not in any other way, not in any other fashion or manner, but through the Jews, that part of mankind that was not elected to any of the classes of spiritual Israel of the gospel age. Again, Romans 11, for I would not, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part is happened to Israel. Even though that part is very great, the part in blindness, it is only in part happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in, not forever, until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. And a very telling scripture from Acts 15, Simon hath declared how God at the first, maybe first, did visit the Gentiles to take out of them a people for his name. And to this agree the words of the prophets, as it is written, After this I will return, and I will build again the tabernacle of David, which is fallen down. And I will build again the ruins thereof, and I will set it up. That the residue, please note the connection, that, yes, in order to, yes, that's the purpose of setting up and building up the ruins of the tabernacle of David, that the residue of men might seek after the Lord, all the Gentiles upon whom my name is called, said the Lord who doth all these things. So this shows very clearly that after, yes, visiting the Gentiles, in order to take out of them a people for his name, the spiritual Israel of the gospel age in its classes, especially the little flock, but not only that. And after this, I will return. So after electing people for his name, God promises to return in order to build again the tabernacle of David, which is fallen down. And of course, that's rebuilding of tabernacles of David's tabernacle has its purpose, in order that the residue of men, are people who have not been selected as people for his name, people who do not become spiritual Israel of the gospel age in its several classes that are, as we know, are elected during that time. And then all those other people, also the name of the Lord is called upon them, because they also belong to Jesus, having been paid, yes, bought out by him, just like everybody else, all the descendants of Adam and Eve, and they also have a future, a chance to become perfect, to get back to perfection, and to enjoy eternal life if that coming back to perfection is successful in their case in the millennium after they are brought back from the tomb. According to Zechariah 12, Israel, even though a tiny nation in itself, was to become a universal problem for the whole world, which is true even now, with more of that problem to come in the near future. Let's see. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in the siege both against Judah and against Jerusalem. And in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it. Please note that there are two different groups of nations for whom Israel was to become to be a hard problem. Number one, a cup of trembling. In our other translations have a cup of reeling, a cup of staggering, unto all the people round about. The people round about would be Arab nations living around Israel, close in bordering Israel. And those Arab nations living around Israel, for the most part, take a very unbalanced attitude toward Jews and toward their homeland. And that attitude is devoid of any logic, any basic foundations of justice, because they deny them the very right to have their own country and to live in their own country. There are slogans like Palestine from the river to the sea, or do away with the project called Israel. And those slogans can be heard, a lot of them. I think these two come from America. Palestine from the river to the sea, I saw it on television from America. Some black people, I don't know why black people are against Israel too, but it seems they are. Or do away with the project called Israel. A few days ago in New York, they also had said Intifada from New York to Palestine. They want an Intifada to spread, across the world, and they want the whole world to rise up in arms against Israel and get rid of them, do away with them. Strange, but true, and those anti-Semitic feelings are on the increase at the moment, as you are well aware. And group number two, mentioned by Zechariah, a burdensome stone for all people, not only for all the people round about, mainly Arab nations countries living around Israel, but a burdensome stone for all people, all nations of the world, not only those close to Israel, bordering it from the three sides. Israel has not become the kind of problem many expected it to become, because the expectation was, before Israel came into being as a country, as a nation, that since Jews, while they were in dispersion, yes, among the European countries, Jews were only good at trading. In Poland, they are usually associated with trading. They are very good people at buying and selling, and they can make a profit out of it. But they thought, because people thought that because that was the only thing they had always been doing, trading, they would never manage as farmers, for example, or as contractors, or as scientists, or as inventors, or industry workers, or teachers, or musicians, or whatever. But they did, and they still do. Please note, and it is, I think, a matter of interest, that 25, almost 24 point something, so I would say almost 25% of all Nobel Prize winners are of Jewish descent. Isn't it strange that such a tiny nation, not even 1% of all mankind, produced brains, heads, intelligent people who get Nobel Prizes, 25% of them. In all those different areas, Nobel Prizes are awarded to people. Very strange, but probably it comes down, it can be explained to Jewish people being taught by the law, being disciplined by the law, being punished by the law in many, many cases, because as we know, they were. And even though they failed to keep the law, their attempts, even though unsuccessful, probably have made some good to their genes, and they are much more talented than the average human being. That's my guess. That's my own explanation of why 25% of all Nobel Prize winners are of Jewish origin, Jewish descent. I cannot find any other explanation for that. If anyone can, yes, please share that with me. The dominating spirit, or the dominating attitude of the people at large, the so-called public around the world, is more pro-Palestinian than pro-Israeli. That's what it is at the moment. With even such movements as Black Lives Matter publicly speaking out against Israel, which I do not understand, because if Black people have been persecuted, or they think they have been persecuted, and in many cases they were, why don't they sympathize with other people who were and still are equally persecuted? But they speak out against them. I don't understand that, but that's what it is. What we are witnessing right now is fittingly described in Psalm 83, but I will quote only the first 6 verses. You can read the whole if you like. Keep not thou silence, of God, hold not thy peace, and be not still, O God. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee, having lifted up the head, have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones. Maybe the hidden should better be translated protected ones. Hidden by you, protected by you. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee, the tabernacles of Edom and the Ishmaelites of Moab, and it continues like that. So please note that in Psalm 83, which is usually associated with poetry and with glorifying God and saying how wonderful he is, also have some prophetic parts to it. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people. They consulted against thy protected ones, protected by you, saying, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. Yeah, so BLM slogans. Do away with the project called Israel. Echoes that sentiment. The problem of and the problem with Israel will only be solved at the end of Jacob's trouble, with its solution coming as a huge and unwelcome surprise to all present-day Israel haters, whose numbers are higher than we can imagine, because many of them are haters in secret, and they do not come out openly, but probably one day they will. Talking about the second phase of Jacob's trouble, we must remember that we are talking about the future which is much closer now than it was for brothers Russell, Johnson, or Jolie, but it is still future. What we will be covering today will maybe not be so much future, but, well, the present with some insights into the future, but the further we go down the prophecy line, it will be more and more future. And I will try to sketch out a picture of that future event based on what the Bible says, based on what we can find in the literature, and based on what we can see in the events already taking place around us. Such a sketch should be of interest to everybody in every nation, not only to Israelites. For this tribulation is the last act of the world anarchy, the last one. Immediately after which, the world will hear the small voice of Jesus' kingdom on earth, beginning, as I said before, in the land of Israel, the homeland of the prophets, whom God will lead out of their tombs for his people, especially Israel, as his representatives, and in Israel, for the whole world. In the book of Ezekiel, God devoted 2 whole chapters, 38 and 39, to this momentous event. Plus, there are some copious passages in Zechariah and slightly less copious ones in several other Old Testament books, to which we will be referring as we go, as we proceed, as we move on with our topic. So let's start from the invaders or the aggressors. According to Ezekiel 38, they are to come, for the most part, from the lands north of Israel. North of Israel. That's the direction to remember, because that's the chief one, major one, main one from which they are to come. He calls them, I mean Ezekiel, he calls them Gog and Magog, with Gog being the king of the land of Magog, as it is presented by Ezekiel. So it means that Gog represents the leaders of nations as the enemies of God's people, and Magog, the led ones of the nations as enemies of God's people, because Gog and Magog stand for enemies of God's people, but of course, every kind of organization, even anarchistic organization, needs some leaders and some led ones. So Gog, the leaders in all those different countries which will be taking part in that final aggression, and Magog, the led ones, the ones that will follow their leaders in their hatred against Jews. Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus said the Lord God, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and I will turn thee back, and put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth, and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords, Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet, Gomer and all his bands, the house of Togarmah of the north quarters and all his bands, and many people with thee. Most of the names mentioned by Ezekiel we can see in Genesis 10 as the descendants of Japheth. Japheth, I think that's the pronunciation, the son of Japheth. So I have just emphasized or highlighted the ones we need. So Gomer, Magog, Tubal, Meshech, and Togarmah. These settled in Europe, north of Israel. So these are the descendants of Japheth, who settled in north of Israel, in Europe, and that's from where they are to come as part of this big Gog and Magog group. There are 3 more listed by Ezekiel. They are in red, yes, Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya. Persia is today's Iran. Ethiopia and Libya do not need explanation. And they are to the east, located to the east and to the south of Israel, not to the north. But the north direction is the most important, so please keep that in mind. If we transfer it into a map, Ezekiel's locations would be as shown below. So you can, yes, I don't need any, I think I don't need to comment on that. You can see Israel and all those different directions from which the enemies of Israel as Gog and Magog are to come in the future. That is in terms of the Old Testament, using the terminology, the terms, expressions used by Ezekiel. And if we transfer it into the present day terminology, the pertinent locations would be as follows. So you can see more or less the same. Again, this northern direction, the most important one, which is Russia at the very top to the north of Israel, and also Turkey in the north, And you can also see Iran and Ethiopia, Libya. So these are the directions. So the attack is to come, as you can see, not only from the north. This eastern and southern direction is also mentioned, but the northern direction is the main one. It's so much so that sometimes Ezekiel only mentions the north, yes, leaving all the other directions aside, which means that the north is the most important one and the one to worry about, or the one to look forward to. Yes, there are three. Yes, I have three, I think three places from Ezekiel 38. He says that they will come of the north quarters without mentioning any other direction. 38 verse 15, thou shalt come from thy place out of the north parts. And chapter 39 2, I will cause thee to come up from the north parts. So this northern direction is very, very important. Probably the main impulse or the leadership or the, I don't know what, yeah, the whole motivation, inspiration will come from the one in the north, which of course is Russia. Why? Why will they do that? Why should they be doing such a thing? As the trouble in its different stages of war, revolution, and anarchy, interspersed with pestilences and epidemics, will increasingly be dismantling the fabric of present societies, as it will, because it is already doing that, and it will continue to do so. Some will look with a jealous eye upon Israel, which will be living in a state of relative peace and prosperity. And that will encourage anarchist elements to take possession of its goods and unleash their hatred on the Jews in the process. Two different things at the same time. This year's developments in connection with Russia's invasion of Ukraine are showing another, maybe the most important reason for a future outburst of hatred against Israel by its northern enemies. And what I mean is natural gas and crude oil. Natural gas and crude oil. With most of the world disgusted today with Russia's atrocities committed in Ukraine, and with Europe phasing out its energy imports of Russian natural gas and oil, as you probably know, Poland, my country, and also Bulgaria, and they say that as of today also Finland, have already been deprived of Russian supplies, gas supplies by Russia, because the three countries do not want to pay in rubles, which Russia demands. European countries are in that situation. European countries are in great need of new energy sources, and Israel seems to be the perfect country to hop in and fill up the vacuum left by Russia, which will downgrade Russia even further, also decreasing the importance of other oil producers like Iran, which has always been a friend of Russia and probably is the most bitter enemy of Israel from among Muslim countries. So instead of Russia, as you can see in the picture, we may soon have Israel as Europe's supplier of natural gas, and not only that, because it seems that oil is also found there. But if you are wondering how that may be possible, please note that of late Israel has had more natural gas than it can use itself or export to neighboring countries, which it is already doing in the area into areas like Egypt and or Jordan. Well, probably that will be the last thing I will show you. It's too much reading, but just maybe the things highlighted. The title, Israel's Energy, that's not my writing, that comes from the press, from the internet. Israel's energy dilemma, more natural gas than it can use or export. We have a surplus of gas, as a minister said. Israeli waters are swimming in gas, and what we have discovered is only the beginning. Paragraph number 2, only the parts in bold. More than 4 billion barrels of crude oil below these natural gas deposits. So there are gas deposits in the sea, and crude oil expected to be found there. The most important energy news since the founding of the state. Paragraph number 3, the highlighted parts. A large shale oil deposit 30 miles west of Jerusalem. These deposits comprise the third largest shale oil reserve in the world and expects to yield 250 to 500 billion barrels of oil. Many experts believe that Israel has a volume of oil in this reserve and other undiscovered shale oil reserves equivalent to that of Saudi Arabia. Israeli policymakers long favored a proposal to build a pipeline to Europe through Turkey, but relations with President Erdogan have deteriorated in recent years, closing that option at least for now. The most ambitious proposal is to build the world's deepest and longest gas pipeline to Italy through Cyprus and Greece. So that's what we can expect, and this is happening before our very eyes. But I think my time is up, so I will have to pause here, and I will continue from that very slide tomorrow. Thank you, and may God add His blessing.